Steve was just asking, so the news on Jim and Mary Jean, the funeral is probably going to be at South Beloit Church, not in Freeport, because that's where all of her children and her mother and all are. So that's where we stand on that. Of course, we mentioned the other day. Oh, fine. We mentioned the other day Jerry Harbaugh. They have found cancer in 11 different spots, and so they're not going to increase any treatments that he's on now. It's going to stay about the same. And Pam has a new hairline fracture of that ankle again, so that slowed her back down again. Otherwise everybody's healthy and happy. Let's start with a prayer, and then we'll. Doug, you feel like doing the prayer tonight?
Dear Heavenly Father, take this questions. Day of blessing. Bless your family and members. Thank you for this opportunity to come together and study your word. Amen.
And Doug's well enough, he doesn't want to be on my list anymore, recuperating. He's recouped. Okay, so we're in James chapter 1 again. We're going to be starting verses 9 through 11, as we talked about last week. That both the poor and the rich have their trials, and they may be different trials, but they're both trials. It doesn't change. In fact, in many ways, they're the same temptations. The poor look for more, and it's just the rich maybe have more temptations because of more availability. We do know in biblical times that the wealthy tended to prey on the poor, take advantage of them, and so there are trials for both, and especially for Christians. So let's look at let's read this. Believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. And those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. They will fade away like a little flower in the field. The hot sun rises, and the grass withers. The little flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. In the same way, the rich will fade away with all of their achievements. Now this was clicking. Oh, there we go. So, verses 9 through 11. No one is exempt from the trials. Verse 9 talks about a brother of low degree, and the word there means he has been made low. So this is saying basically before this person became a Christian, no matter what their financial status was at that point, they have been made low by the circumstance. As it said, he should rejoice because he's been brought low. So we've talked about this before, the reasons why so many of the first century Christians were so poor. One is the time and place. They were being taxed to death by the Roman Empire. And then on top of that, when they became a Christian, they lost their prestige, they lost property, they lost their position in the community. And justice was often turned against them in an attempt to return them to Judaism. Now, what do I mean by that?
Well, their whole social life was turned upside down. Their method of doing business they were probably shut out of that. And so if they were extremely wealthy, they might be able to rest on that for a while. But that's going to pass. And they just had no friends per se or economic survival.
But how was justice, freedom, all that perverted in order to try and bring them back into Judaism?
Well, they were shut out. I mean, the justice was either turn or burn, so to speak.
And how?
They just weren't, the other Jews would not buy from them or utilize their services. So consequently, they couldn't participate in the financial part of the nation.
They were at times they were even driven out of their homes and their homes confiscated. And in order, again, all this is trying to force them back into Judaism. Now, do we have a similar concept in the church today?
Yes.
What is it?
We withdraw fellowship from those that walk away.
It's very different because we're supposed to do it lovingly, but at the same time, the pressure is still there that if you don't live the way God has prescribed, then you don't live with us. You're not going to be part. And of course, we've heard that sometimes kids need that too. If you can't be a part of the family, then you're not in the family. Come back when you're ready to change. I mean, it's not a foreign philosophy in dealing with other people. But they took it to an extreme in those days. Are there any religious groups that still do this pressure today to this extent?
Somewhat, yes.
Like the Mormons do, but I'm thinking of Islam. Yes, sir.
The Amish.
The Amish, yeah, they totally shun you. Yes? Oh. Yeah, Islam, I mean, they'll just flat out kill them if they're in the regions where that is so strong. So then, why should we rejoice? Well, because Ephesians 1:3. Let's look at it. Dad, Kimmy?
Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in heavenly places in Christ.
Okay. So he's blessed us with what?
Every spiritual blessing.
Now, so does that mean we have a right as Christians to expect every physical blessing? Every financial blessing? Every health blessing? No. But he's given us every spiritual blessing.
And I've heard, don't pray for an easy life. Pray for God's grace and wisdom.
I would love if our prayers were so powerful we could take away pain and we could take away suffering, but that's just not how it works. And there is a measure of pain, suffering, illness, whatever, that's not brought by God, it's brought by Satan. It's out there already because of that.
All other blessings in the world, some of them are given by hard work and pursuing your dreams or the life choices that you've made for Christians and non-Christians. But spiritual blessings are reserved only for Christians.
Yeah, sometimes I think as a minister, I look at some of these TV guys and like Creflo Dollar from Atlanta, we would always, I had to drive by his church every day on my way to work, and it was this massive complex, and you think, boy, it'd be nice to have some of that cash, his, $4 million jet, but the reality is, I would always think back to what God said to Paul. And if I gave you those blessings, would you get so arrogant that you think you deserve those blessings? Or, what would that do to your spirituality? And of course, we have seen that the majority of those big names, what happens? They fall. And it's usually sexual sins that gets them and it's because of that arrogance, that I'm in charge, I'm the boss, and they forget who God is. There's another one here. We are joint heirs. So what is an heir besides Jan and Dwayne? What is an heir?
Well, they've received the inheritance of, I'm going to say, a parent.
Okay, so let's go to James 2:5. It's close. You should find it easily. Allison? You want to read it?
Listen, my beloved brethren, did not God choose the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he promised to those who love him?
so he has promised us, to those who love him, to be joint heirs in the kingdom. So we get part of that. And of course, the next one here, we don't have to read it, this one, but it includes sitting in the heavenly places. It also includes us being an elect race. Now, why does he use the concept of being a royal priesthood? Kristen?
When I think of the priesthood is being able to approach God, and we can all do that if we are Christ.
Okay. It also links us in the order of Melchizedek, or it makes it like that. Why does he talk about Melchizedek?
Because he didn't have people before him or people after him, but he was a king and he was a priest of God.
Yeah, in other words, he found God. And he lived in such a way that God considered him a priesthood of one, and whatever people in his kingdom that converted, but he followed God.
Actually, even a priest above the Levitical priesthood, because through Abraham they paid tribute to him.
Mm-hmm. So he's made us a royal priesthood, and Crystal, for me, that hit the nail on the head, because we can approach the throne of God. We have lost that idea of intercessors beyond Jesus. We don't have to go to a human priest and ask for him to pray for our forgiveness. We don't have to go to the temple and tithe specify whatever the priest said. If you don't pay this, and remember I mentioned it some time back that my secretary had a child. They wanted to have the baby baptized in the Catholic Church, but they looked at their records and she had not paid her tithe in so long that they would not baptize the baby till she had caught up. And it was several $1,000s. We don't have someone between us and God that's setting those kind of rules. And now some might say, well, the church lays down rules, the elders lay down rules, but we don't. Because the rules come from and his word. And I don't expect you to be obedient to anything that is not part of that. Now, obviously, things like the mask mandate, the church saying, we have the authority over the day-to-day running of the local church as far as things like that. But I'm saying when it comes to spiritual, we can only enforce what God gave us. Anything more than that, we should not be in that position any longer. So, why should the poor rejoice? Well, because we've got this inheritance in heaven. 1 Peter 1:4. How?
Not there.
It's right before 2 Peter. Okay, Donnie, you got it?
To obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not take away, reserved in heaven for you.
So, it can't go anywhere. Ben asked many years ago, he said, so I'm your only heir, right? This was a time when we had foster kids, and so he's like, I'm the only one, you're the only one. So I get it all when you die. You get all the bills, you get all the, you get nothing else. But, in our case, we've been looking, with mom and dad, and at that stage in life, we're looking at what do you call it? Nursing homes, but also assisted living places. And, the fear of mom's money going away, not our fear, but her fear, because the government's going to take 50%, and then she's got to have her money to live on and all that. And you see how quickly a very sizable retirement and savings can just disappear. But God says, it's not going to disappear. Your inheritance is locked in as long as, you remember whose you are and who you are. And we get that because we have been explain redeemed again. What's it mean? Bought back. We've been redeemed. We've been bought back. You think about the idea of being redeemed. if you went to a pawnbroker, I don't even have any of those in Freeport, do you? If you went to a pawnbroker, is there still?
Oh, yeah.
Oh. So you go to a pawnbroker and you say, here, take this gold watch, and they give you so much money for it. And you go back and you redeem the watch. You give them the money plus interest that they loaned you. You go home, he can't come and say, you know what, I decided I want the watch back. Once you redeemed it, it's yours again. The same thing with the blood of Christ. There's no give backs. He's done that. Now we can walk away from the blood. Which again, I have always defined that personally as that is the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. When you turn your back on the blood of Christ, having known what it was and what it did, you've turned your back on that inheritance, that redemption. But the poor, no matter what else happens in life, you're still redeemed. You've still been bought back. And your name's written in heaven. That is one big book. But yeah, your name's written in heaven. What are some of the, side note here, what are some of the ways that we know heaven has our name? What are some of the things that the scriptures tell us about that?
John 14, just want to prepare a place for us.
Okay? So, he's built our house. It's there for us. What about angels? In the church, we're scared to death of angels. Because we don't know. You know, it's kind of like the Holy Spirit. We know, but we don't know. What are some of the things that the angels still do? Huh? Look at Job. You know, and
Clarence.
Jacob's ladder. Yeah, what? Clarence is not an angel that I know of.
Well, he's second class, though.
Oh, the angels unawares, the angels that are sent out there to test Christians. There's a number of different references, and we don't understand all about it, but there are enough references that while we don't particularly have a guardian angel in the way the world might think about it, we still have angels who are watching and reporting to God. They know us by name. They know what we're doing. Now, we also, we become a people with a mission. Let's go to Mark 16, 15, 16. Steve?
You're getting there.
It's okay. Ran a little slow, but she was old.
But they moved. Okay. Mark 16, verse 15. And he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. He who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned.
So, James is talking here about the poor. But we remember, we're not the poor that sit on the side of the road and say, woe is me, I've got no money, so I've got no purpose, I've got nothing, I'm not doing anything, to change my lot in life. We still have a mission. We still have responsibilities, and that is to share the gospel. And again, I talk about it, how interesting and easy it becomes when you listen for openings. I had to call stamps.com today and change some. I'm going to make Patty really mad now. We're going to keep bringing it up. I called stamps.com. She called Pitney Bowes. But anyway, I'm talking to the customer service guy, and we've got kind of a lag there while he's looking for stuff up. And we wound up talking about church. And he asked where I preach. I worked that in, that I'm a minister. And talked about where I preach. And he talked about his family goes to church all the time. And he knew of a Church of Christ because they're in a small town in Missouri, and there's a church in our town, and all this. And you can work it into the conversation in a way that is not obvious that you're, stomping toes or whatever. You can work it in as you live. But you just have to look for those openings. You have to listen,
Yeah, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6 says, I planted, referring to Paul, Apollos waters, but God was causing the growth. I think that's an important lesson. at least for me at this stage.
Yeah, and take it like today's conversation. We don't know at what point this guy, and he never said where he went to church, but it's got to be Southern Baptist if it wasn't Church of Christ. But, you know, we don't know at what point he will have something in his life, he will interact with a member of the church down there, and that will ring a bell that, you know, I met somebody on the phone one day, and you don't know what can come of that. And we're important to the church. In what ways is the individual member important to the church? Crystal first.
Well, we each have I would say a part to play. We're each a part of the body, and if you're missing one of those, maybe that task is a little harder to get done for the
Steve?
church as a whole.
Yeah, we cannot lose a limb without suffering consequences. Steve?
I was thinking 1 Corinthians chapter 12, what Crystal mentioned, talks about we're part of the body, and it goes into an actual analogy. And most of us, a couple weeks ago, I lost part of a fingernail, and you would think, well, so what? You talk about something sensitive, and that's underneath the bed of a live fingernail. And so it hurt. And so the analogy is there, you know, when my finger hurt, it wasn't just the finger remotely to the rest of my body, it's me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Crystal.
I was just thinking along these lines, I went to church with my sister one time back in California, and in their foyer, they have like an outline of the body. And then they have different people's pictures from the church on different parts of the body. And I thought that was really neat, you know. I don't know if they had any rhyme or reason to how they did it, but anyway, it was neat how they did it.
Yeah, Steve? Did you have, oh, sorry. Anyone else? Are we all given the same talents? Are we all given talents? Absolutely. And are we ever given more talents, or do we get our quota when we become a child of God?
You may never master all of them, but you can try.
Yeah. Allison will tell you, I have a bad habit of trying new hobbies, and over the years. And the thing is, I just like to learn a new skill, and I try to master at least to what extent I can of that skill. I mean, when I took up music again after we were married for a while, I played in a band, and we went around, traveled around and played. When I scuba dived, I wasn't happy just going and scuba diving. I became a master scuba diver instructor. And, you know, it's just, I got to do these things. But, yeah, rock climbing, I became an instructor. I didn't just go climb. I always try to learn to do more. Well, the thing is, the church is the same way. You do something, we should try to master it. But we should also be open to the other opportunities there are to do things and to grow. So don't be afraid to try something, and, you know, don't be afraid to fail and start over again. I failed really bad one day scuba diving. Not that I got hurt, but I was teaching a rescue class. I had my back to the training area, this lake we trained on, and a woman started to drown, and here I am, the instructor, teaching people how to rescue, and I didn't even hear her scream. It was Allison. She forgot to pull the ripcord and inflate her life jacket. So she's swimming to the surface and then sinking back down for the weight of her equipment. And all of a sudden my class jumps up and they start running to the water to go. And I turn around and say, oh, that's my wife. Anyway, you can't be afraid of failing. I didn't quit scuba diving. She did, but I didn't quit scuba diving after that. You just keep trying. Keep learning. Yeah, sometimes I'll tell you about some of the major failures, like my son letting me fall about 60 feet one day off a cliff. I lived. He caught me eventually before I hit the ground and bounced.
Did he live?
Question that. So, Christ is going to give everyone what they need. He is not going to give you a talent that is just not in your makeup, and then expect you to do that. God gives you the talents that you are capable of developing, and if and when you do really well with that, He'll give you another one. He'll give you more if you're willing. Okay, and so then he moves on to the rich. And he says, the rich will be made low. So define how that's going to happen, because the rich have got their money.
They're gonna have problems like anything else.
Okay?
Like the poor have problems, the middle class has problems, and the rich have problems.
Let's talk specifically about the first century church that James is addressing in around the year 50 or year 60. What's going to happen in AD 70? Jerusalem will fall. The Jewish and Christian churches have been dispersed all over the Middle East because nowhere is safe for them. So in the first century church, right away, how are those rich going to be made low?
Well, when they leave, they can't take all their riches with them.
Okay? Anything else?
They're gonna lose all their contacts that they depend on.
Yeah, it's like Doug's trucking firm. All of a sudden, nobody will sign a contract with you. Now you've got all your trucks, but they're sitting there. It is, in many ways, it is easier for the wealthy to crash than it is for the poor. Because, let's say this early Christian did have a trucking firm. We'll just stick with it. Early Christian did have a trucking firm. All of a sudden he loses all his business, but the employees still expect to get paid till they get fired. You got equipment. And so the early church was that way too. Let's say you were a trader and nobody buys your products. Nobody will hire you to go out, on the trade route and buy silk. They're not going to. And so the person that had the large house and all the servants and all that, they will actually crash in many ways faster than the poor, because the poor had nothing to lose. It doesn't change the pain of it. It doesn't change the perspective of it, of feeling abused, feeling mistreated, whatever. But in this case, James says, it happens to both of them, to the wealthy and the poor. So, how can a man that's still rich be made low? Well, another way is he has to learn he's got to be dependent on something other than money. Has to learn to trust Christ.
I think we all have to learn that God has no value in money. He created this whole earth and everything it's on, and we've assigned value to things. But God didn't assign the same values. He assigned values to other things, not what the world considers wealth.
Now, if someone's talent, for those of I don't know how many here remember Dale Lauer, but not many of us left either, but Dale had a talent for making money. Dale could buy the worst property in Freeport and double its value in a week and sell it. He was good at that. Well, if that's your ability, that's fine. And God, as long as you use it to the glory of God. And Dale did. Allison and I, when Ben was born, Dale he bought a house for us to live in and rented it to us. Now, when we left, he sold it and made a big profit on it. But he bought it specifically so that we would have an affordable place, because he knew I was driving to Chicago every day. And he said, I'll give you something affordable. Just take care of it, paint it, whatever, help increase the value. People using what God puts in front of them. So you've got to be dependent on something other than money, and you have to use that which you have. You'd be brought low by persecutions, or let's even include health problems. You can be brought low by something that you thought in all your life that you were in control of everything, and all of a sudden you're in control of nothing because of health or whatever. What? What?
Lack
Everybody keeps saying the screen goes blank and I don't see it ever.
Right.
Just like in Greece.
So, the dangers of wealth.
That's because you're moving your hands.
Is it?
It's your triggers.
Let's look at 1 Timothy 6:9. I'm going to get a mirror. Like, remember the old World War II fighter jets? They had that mirror up over the pilot's head. I want a mirror so I can watch what y'all are talking about. But it probably is my trimmer's touching the button.
You were doing it last week when you could use it, you can hold it.
Huh. See, well, not me. I went and had a vision test this week, and I had to do that thing where you're looking, for all the peripheral, those little dots. And the girl said, "We got to stop the test. You're clicking on stuff. There's nothing there. You're just clicking." And I said, "I have hand tremors, and this thing's sensitive. I mean, I'm just click, 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 click." So she gave me one that I had to go click, click every time. All right, 1 Timothy 6:9. See?
But those who want to get rich fall into temptation, and a snare, and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction.
Okay. How about Matthew 19:23? Who has that? Okay.
And Jesus said to his disciples, I tell you the truth, it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, so there's dangers to wealth. It did at that time when my hand was wiggling on the controller. So I might need a new controller. So there are dangers in wealth.
Jim, I think we need to realize here too that in this context, everybody in this room would be considered rich,
Absolutely.
as opposed to, so it's not massive amounts or,
No.
and it's attitude towards it.
One of the very neat things about my travel in so many countries around the world is I have always appreciated the fact that we are probably the most blessed nation in the world. And I say that loosely because I don't believe that God necessarily blesses a nation because we're not deserving of blessings the way things are going and the way things have been. But we are blessed to live in a land that is so fruitful, or we are very fortunate that this happened, that we live here. But you go to places like Haiti, man, nothing. This COVID was, very few people got COVID in Haiti. Very few people, just a couple thousand. Very few died. But their government shut it down, and when you live on $1 a day and you can't leave for 45 days, I think they were shut down. What do you do when you had maybe a couple dollars saved? And gas is about $18 a gallon. Last time I talked to Luke about it. Steve.
I forgot the train of thought.
Okay. When you think about it. So, explain the relevance of James' analogy about the flowers coming and going and dying. And
Well, we're only here for a short season. I always remember Winston saying, I've never seen a U-Haul trailer behind a hearse yet.
yeah.
For some reason, that stuck in my mind. And that's true. You can be the richest man on the face of this planet, and it will not matter on the other side of the soil.
No matter how good it looks, no matter how pretty that flower is, they all just wither away and they end up in the same place, in the same, one doesn't look any better than the other, no matter what they were when they were alive.
And I was gonna say, rich or poor, death is a great equalizer. We're all gonna return to the same thing to us.
Yeah. Fiona asked me this week, how old is the earth? So we had a discussion about that, and we think that life is pretty long for us, but when you think of the scope of God created this earth, however many years ago he did, in whatever form he did, you know, we're still, that's 10,000 years, you know, at least. So she's like, okay, how did that happen? God said he made it. He made it in full age when he did it. But anyway, so when you die, where are your riches? Well, they're not in the U-Haul behind you. They just recently found a new tomb in Egypt, I saw, and it was slammed full of it was not Tutankhamun's again, but this had a lot of treasures in it. It had his wives and you know, all this stuff. Well, guess what? They put all that in there for him in the afterlife, and guess what? 2,000 years, it's still there. Right where they put it. So, realistically, what control do you have over your things? You know, very little. Again, you know, my parents are in this process of figuring out what to do. But the reality is, they're being told what to do by myself and my brother and my sister. You know, they don't really have much say-so over it. And it happens to all of us. What is it? First generation builds it, second generation maintains it, third generation loses it. You know, when you're talking about businesses, a lot of times family businesses. So, for the wealthy, he says, you've been brought low because you've given up your dependence on your wealth to see you through troubles. Now you have to depend on Christ. And it doesn't mean you lose your wealth. It means you now rely on Christ for everything. Let's keep moving here. In verse 11, we talked about that. Okay. Oh, that's why I brought that back. Verse 11, he says, the hot sun rises and the grass withers, the little flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. In the same way, the rich will fade away with all of their achievements. That is actually a partial quote out of the book of Isaiah. A voice said, shout. I asked, what should I shout? Shout, the people are like the grass. Their beauty fades as quickly as the flowers in the field. The grass withers, the flowers fade beneath the breath of the Lord. So it is with people. The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of God stands forever. So James is actually quoting from the prophet Isaiah when he said that. Another week or so, go look at it. But I have a little tree in my office among my many trees, but it's called the Tree of 1,000 Flowers. It's a sarissa, and it's blooming. It's starting to bloom again. And it's got these tiny little white flowers. And they are very beautiful, but they only last a couple of days, and each one falls off. And then it's brown within a day and ugly. So that's what he's talking about. It's such a short span of time.
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we did a lesson every year with that. You know, we plant the flowers in the spring, they're there through the summer. Fall comes, and they die.
Mm-hmm. So, Isaiah and James are both reminding us of the brevity of life. It's short. It's what we make of it while we're in it. And of course, Matthew 6, he said, so don't lay up your treasures on earth. Build them up in heaven. So, verses 12 through 16. James is switching over to trials now. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. For once he's been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. So, where do we find happiness? Well, the world gives us a lot of options. Pleasures, you know, the old eat, drink, and be merry. Money, new things, success, reading books on how to be happy. You know, I figure if you have to read a lot of books on how to be happy, then you're going to miss the point. So, the world says there's a lot of different ways you can be happy. And I think people are learning a big lesson with COVID right now because they realize all that external stimulation is gone when you're stuck at home for a long time. And you realize there needs to be more than just going out to movies and going out to eat and whatever. Life has to have more. So Peter says, if you do what's right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it, you find favor with God. So when you do what's right, even if you suffer for it. And I say even, that's not the strict Greek translation there, but even if you suffer, because we don't always suffer for doing right. But even if you have to suffer for it, and you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God. We also know that Peter that said, if you do right and you don't suffer for it, what good was it? In other words, it was too easy. You know. So the word says Christians find happiness in knowing that outward trials can't destroy inner peace. It can be a struggle sometimes, right? When you got trials. Crystal mentioned last week Tom's very long-term illnesses. You know, he's been dealing with it for so long. And we had that the phone call comes. I remember Steve calling saying Kevin's had a bad wreck and how that felt. You know, I heard his voice and I cried with him because, you know, I felt his pain over the phone, his fear of that. These outward trials only crush you when you don't have the inner strength to deal with it, to live up to it. Now, we all stumble, but we can survive it. Because mainly, we know that each time we stand up to it, we pass the test. So even if, okay, we say, who brings trials? We talked about this early on. No. God brings trials. Satan brings temptations, right? Because God cannot tempt. James talks about that. God cannot tempt us. So, whether we survive a temptation or whether we survive a trial, the end result's the same. We pass this test and we're rewarded for that. And each time we pass the test, we get a little stronger for the next one. You know, we can deal with it a little bit better than we did before. Especially when we know it was produced by proper motives and actions. Let's go to 1 Peter 4.
Let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, or an evildoer, or as a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name.
Okay? So if you suffer because you're a sinner, you're on your own, right? You're on your own. If you suffer while you're still doing right, we're supposed to glorify in it. To do. It's so easy to say it. It's tough to do it. You know. But that's what we're told to do. So how do we find that inner strength to glorify God when we're going through something really bad? What can we do to find that?
Pray.
We can pray about it. Okay. What else? Turn to Scripture. Turn to each other. Now, all of these things that God gave us and that will give us strength. Look at, back to that guy I was on the phone with today. He said, you know, it's been so hard because our church still hasn't been meeting very well. And I said, God created us for fellowship. And without fellowship, the church suffers both individually and corporately and globally. He goes, oh, amen to that. He said, because this is terrible being working from home. I'm in this house 24/7 with my kids and my wife, and we don't get to go to church and see our friends. And it's like, yep, we're not created to sit at home. Sometimes we have to, but we're not created for that. So we find that way of escape through steadfastness. Again, I used this analogy a long time ago, but there's only one military command that makes you stop immediately on a dime. If you say halt, if you're marching in a group or walking a group and you say halt, you take 2 more steps and then you stop. It's just the way it is. If someone yells stand fast, you are supposed to freeze, and the main reason is because somebody may have stepped on a landmine or tripwire. And so everyone freezes for the best opportunity to diffuse the situation and get out of it safely. And so the same thing here. Stand fast, steadfast. Don't give in. Don't waver. Hang on to it.
Jeff?
Yes.
I don't remember where, I'm guessing it's Psalms or Proverbs, but I always remember the phrase, happy is the man whose Lord is God. Yeah, so I was trying to thumb through, trying to find that in the book. But you're talking about happiness, you know, when we have the right perspective, and that is, the Lord is our God.
Mm-hmm. So we know our crown is waiting, and we're waiting for those words, well done, good and faithful servant. It would be so much easier if we heard them every time we passed a test or trial, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Well, yeah. Okay, we do. But not
You
verbally.
just don't hear it in your voice.
Yeah. I mean,
You can't tell, when you have those, and when you know you've come through something, there's a feeling, it's not, you don't hear a voice from heaven, it's like going, hey, attaboy. But you know it, you feel it, you know you've done it, it's an encouragement right there.
I want the clouds to roll back, a dove to fly down out of heaven.
There you go, see, you're a lot pickier than I am.
Now, life would be so much easier if God would say, everyone, Jeff did well today. Just so you know, he did well. Well, I do well every day.
Yeah, would you like it on the days when it's not so good today?
No, I don't want that one. Just ignore me and I'll know.
Tweet that one out, everybody read it.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, Patty. And that's part of that steadfastness. We know what's right and wrong. We know if we do good. And we know, I was talking to William a couple days ago, and Allison just asked him a question. He was getting ready to run outside with his bare feet in the snow. And she said, why are you doing that? It's a challenge. Well, who are you doing challenge? Because we as adults know there are challenges that other kids are putting out there that are life-threatening. And he got all mad and stormed out of the room. And so later I said, now listen, if you had told Grandma your best friend was on there and you just lost a bet on a video game or whatever it was, and you had to run out in the snow for a minute, she'd have said, go for it, it's not going to kill you. But you got defensive, and so we get suspicious. And I said, you got to stop this. Don't be so defensive. He knew he shouldn't have been doing it. And so his mind is getting defensive. We know when we're doing right, we know when we're doing wrong. And usually when we start hiding from each other, from other Christians, we're doing wrong. We need to be watching that. Okay, we're going to stop here for tonight. We will come into James 1:13 next week. I promised after we got started we'd start picking up speed. So we're picking up speed now. Yeah. We will be in James chapter 1 for the next year and a half. And then we'll go to 2. All right, thank you all. I am assuming, unless the majority of you say not, that we will have Wednesday night next week. Well, there'll be a Wednesday night, but it's not Christmas Eve, so is everybody willing? Okay. Then we will do that. I just saw a friend's church, Mom and Dad's church in front of me. They've already put out nothing on the 23rd. Okay, you all have all your family right there in town. What are you doing? Okay, I need a new clicker. If I push this just a little bit to the back,
And what you're doing is
I use my thumb on it and go around.
and we're all.
Yeah, it wiggles just the right place.
Okay, Matt, you know what we're doing next week, right? I'm sure
kindergarten here.
It's fine, you know, most of the time, it's kind of not letting it do anything. But, maybe you have a heater, because there's no.
Yeah.
Yeah. A standalone heater, it's falling on. Because of the.
Yeah.
That we were.
I went to Wisconsin and bought cheese, just so we could.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up.
Cheese crackers.
Oh, yeah.
That's I went, I bought all this cheese up there, and one of them's already moldy, and I had to
Time
clean it.
slow.
It's great, it's good cheese, right?
No. It's lemon almond, I tried.
Nothing wrong with moldy cheese, scrape the whole off and eat it.
And I have some.
About that, when I saw it, I said,
Cheese